Good afternoon. Everybody hear me okay? Well, welcome to the 41st annual Dixie Deer Classic. Happy to see all these faces again. As you know, we did not, the normal fans of the show, we did not have the show last year. We were very disappointed in that, but we're back, no masks. It's time to celebrate. Thank you all for coming. My name's Chad Morgan. I'm with the Wake County Wildlife Club. We put on this show each year to raise money for all outdoor activities and education and conservation. We put all that money right back into the state. So everything that you do here, from entry fees and supporting this, the Dixie Deer Classic, goes to a great cause. Moving right along here, today we have a very unique experience for all of you. We're going to have a live podcast with Mr. Don Higgins here from Chasing Giants podcast. It's going to be interactive. I'll be walking around with the microphone so you can ask some questions. I'm going to let Don introduce the rest of the crew here that'll be on the show today, and let's give them a big hand.
All right, can everybody hear me all right? Awesome. Terry Peer and I started this podcast about 2 years ago, and we set out to be different than any other podcast out there. Our motto is we're looking out for the hunting community, not the hunting industry. We cover just about every topic you can imagine, tell it like it is, and we certainly appreciate your support. Be sure and get your questions ready, because after a short introduction here, we're going to turn it over to you. You guys are going to ask the questions. On Monday, this podcast will be put out, and you guys will be able to hear yourself asking these questions. Before I turn it over to Terry, who's going to tell you a little bit about Lester's Feet, which is a nonprofit organization that we use this platform to support, I want to introduce Joe Miles. Here to my right, Joe is the founder of Asio Camo, our title sponsor. But Joe is a very accomplished whitetail hunter as well. He hunts basically from Mexico to Canada. Anywhere there's whitetails, Joe's very accomplished. He hails from South Carolina, not all that far from here. So if you guys throw a question at me that I can't answer, I'm going to turn it over to this guy because he's the expert. So at this point, I'm going to let Terry tell you a little bit about Lester's Feet, and then we'll get going.
Well, thanks for everybody being here. Lester's Feet was quite honestly an accident. If there's ever an analogy used for outrunning your headlights, it's me and Don with trying to start a nonprofit and navigating our federal government, but that's another story for another day. The foundation is named after my grandfather, who was my childhood hero. He had size 15 shoes, so this is just the way my family is filling his legacy, or his shoes for lack of better terms. Our foundation specializes in identifying families with sick children, so children that are under ongoing treatment or extensive care. Those families have to take off work, lose their jobs, and our foundation comes in and helps them subsidize their monthly bills while they're off work taking care of that child. So we pay our bills directly. We don't hand money to families. We find out who their house payment, their farm payment, their car payments, or whatever is, and we pay those bills directly. So any money that we raise goes directly to what it was intended in the donation. We are a full nonprofit, so if you come see me at the booth later, I can talk more about that. But the highlight of what we're getting ready to kick off is we do a yearly raffle that ends up being most of our money that we raise throughout the year. Last year, Don and I did a very small raffle, thinking that we could raise about $20,000 to help one specific family that had two daughters with leukemia at the same time. We end up raising $130,000, $140,000 before we even knew what happened. So with that momentum, our sponsors like Asio and other vendors have come together. Right now, I have a list in the booth of over 75 prizes of over $150,000 that when you buy a ticket, you have a chance to win. The highlight of that is going to be the grand prize, which is a 2022 Silverado Trail Boss that's donated by Victory Chevrolet and Midwest Land Group. And the key point with this one, people, is if you win that truck, they're paying your taxes for you too. So all you have to do is get a insurance and title it in your home state. So The hardest part about these live podcasts when we get going is you got to have your question ready because there's a lot of dead periods. So just what we don't want on the recording that gets released is about a 20-second delay. So when you have your question and you raise up and this gentleman comes to you, he's going to need to go ahead and go to the next question. That way we can, once Don and the team up here gets it done answering him, we got another question ready to go. Does that make sense? So have your hands up. That way he can navigate it. We're going to handle this just like you guys hear live. We're going to wing it. That's usually how it goes, right?
That's exactly how it goes. There's very, very little, if any, editing that goes into these every week.
Only when Don says something that he shouldn't. But that doesn't happen very often.
Twice a week.
All right, here we go.
You know, the reason they like reading my stuff is that I've always got real-life examples to prove what I'm saying.
There's a lot of good people that listen to this podcast.
You know, other than God and my family, deer hunting would be next in line on my list of priorities.
From the bottom of our hearts, it's just fantastic and awesome to have the support that you guys are giving.
People ask me about expandable broadheads and love swings.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Asio Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to Chasing Giants, episode 107, live from the Dixie Deer Classic in Raleigh, North Carolina. Don, we're in the South, buddy.
We're in the land of Dixie.
You know, it's funny, when I'm in Illinois, being from a Kentucky boy, I always say I'm a Southern boy, but I think I'm a Northern boy now.
You're the middle boy.
Yeah.
I'm the Northern boy, you're the middle boy, and these are the Southern folks here.
So we're sitting here looking at a live audience tonight, and I've always heard that these Southern boys get a little rowdy. But this crowd's been big, but I haven't seen anybody get real rowdy yet.
Maybe we need to change that.
Do we have any deer hunters here tonight? Come on, clap. Yeah, deer hunters. You know, one of my favorite songs growing up was A Country Boy Can Survive. Is there any Hank Jr. fans in here? Yeah. I was disappointed.
Terry, here's how you get the Southern folks wound up. Watch this. Let's go, Brandon! Now we're ready.
Now we're ready. Well, as you guys know, our primary sponsor is Asio Gear. Joe Miles, we have the privilege of Joe not only being here in a booth caddy corner from us that we get to spend a little time with, but we've asked him to come up. For those of you who don't know Asio Gear or Joe Miles, I've said it multiple times on this podcast, you are a deer killing machine, man. A Southern boy that can get it done anywhere in the country.
Well, I don't know about all that. We definitely chase them pretty hard.
Yeah. So real quick before we get into questions, give us a little bit about Joe Miles, Asio Gear, and for everybody here, I want you to also include, we have a special promotion for this Deer Classic where people can come to your booth and get a discount on any of your gear. So make sure you mention that. Anybody come over and talk to us later about it.
Yeah, Joe Miles grew up in Columbia, South Carolina, and like they said, chase a deer from Mexico to Canada, South Carolina at home, and really have a passion for it like Don and Terry. I saw a gap in the apparel industry. You know, I did some sheep and goat hunting in the Rockies, Yukon, Northwest Territory, and really was able to hunt in some super high-end apparel, but the camouflage patterns just really didn't coincide with us tree stand bow hunters. And so I saw a gap there and really wanted to fix it. So what we did is we developed a camo pattern, mimicked the great horned owl feathers. And a lot of people don't know this, but squirrels and white-tailed deer have dichromatic eyesight. They see exactly the same. Humans and deer see completely different. So the way I looked at it was if a great horned owl is hunting squirrels and nature made him a certain camo, and I'm hunting a deer that has the same eyesight as a squirrel, why would I not want to have camo like an owl that's naturally going to hide you from that type vision? Because I feel like a lot of the camo patterns out there now are made to sell me and you. It's
They're
not
made to wear to Waffle House for breakfast.
Exactly right. So we wanted one that really, helped with the deer vision and the way they see. So that's why we developed Asio, and we took that camo pattern and put it on really high quality apparel. And, you know, in the mountain hunting world, they talk about wearing stuff that'll keep you on the mountain longer. And what I wanted to do was produce apparel that would keep you in the tree longer with a really good high-end camo pattern that gets us away from any movement. You know, the deer aren't going to see you near as much when you move the draw or have to adjust yourself in the stand. So we've been doing this. We're going into our third year. Really excited about it. The feedback from people has been great. And, yeah, it's just been it's been a great start. We appreciate Don and Terry letting us come on board. You know, you guys know them really well, and, you know, they're pioneers in the industry. And like Don said to begin with, you know, they tell it like it is. And that's something that we wanted to be aligned with, because that's kind of how our brand is being brought through the industry.
Got anything to say?
I was just going to say, I wore Asio for the first time this past season, and I've wore the most expensive camo out there, and I was really impressed with the zippers, the sleeves, just how well the garments were built. So I can attest to the quality of these garments.
We appreciate that.
We've tried to do a couple favors for friends in the past as it's related to camo. And after getting burned on that deal, we flat out just said we're picking the camo that's best, that we want to wear, and if they decide they want to partner with us, that's who we're at, and we're at Asio, so we believe in it 100%.
I will add that I bought my camo, too. It was not given to me.
I tried to give it to him, but he wouldn't take it.
I wanted to make sure before I endorsed it in any way that I believed in it. So I wanted to buy my first set, and I did.
Yep.
So the good thing about it is, Joe, real quick for everybody to understand, you're a consumer direct company.
Yep.
So you buy online, and the big fear about consumer direct as it comes to clothes is I buy it and it's the wrong size. Tell us, just to appease everybody, what you've put in place. Obviously, for the people here at Dixie Deer Classic, you have samples that they can try on over in the booth. But for somebody listening, if they buy it, what's the risk?
So the way we have it set up, you know, the reason we're consumer direct is when you go and buy a jacket or a coat from Bass Pro or Cabela's, there's a 40% markup there. So we take that out of the deal altogether, and we sell it straight to you. So we're able to take really high quality fabrics and stitching and all the insulation and give it to you at a much more affordable rate. You know, 30 or 40% under the normal, really premium brands that are out there. And when you buy it customer direct, sure, there's you know, you have a concern that it may not fit or you may not like the way it fits. We offer free shipping on everything. We offer free return shipping as well. So if you get it and it doesn't fit, you ship it back to us, and it's absolutely free. And then we have a 30-day money-back guarantee for any reason whatsoever, and then we guarantee the garments for the life of them. So if 5 years down the road you have a button fall off or a zipper break, we'll replace it 100% free, and the shipping is always included in everything that we do.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and start raising your hands for your questions as we start walking around. We're going to kick one right off the bat here.
I got a question for Don, and I'd like Joe to weigh in on it too. Deer minerals. And I'm talking long-term use of deer minerals, not just get an inventory of what you got before you go hunting. But how beneficial is having deer minerals out year to year to year? Does it actually help? Is it worth the cost?
Well, I believe it is, and I talked about this yesterday in my seminar. I had a captive herd of research deer for about 25 years, and I really did a lot of studies with genetics and nutrition. Those were my two areas of interest. When it comes to minerals, I believed all along that minerals would help, and so I actually did a study with my captive herd where I got 7 sets of twin buck fawns, and I separated those into 2 different pens side by side. So there were 7 bucks in each pen. Each buck had a twin buck in the opposite pen. Both pens were fed the exact same feed. The only difference is one pen, I top dressed the feed with this mineral concoction that I was working on at the time. And then at the end of the year, with captive deer, you've got to remove their antlers. When you got a bunch of bucks together, they end up killing each other during the rut. So at the end of the growing season, we would tranquilize those bucks, to remove their antlers, but we would also get a gross Boone and Crockett score of each rack, and then I would total up the total inches of antler in each pen. Now, this is far from a scientific study. We're only talking about $7 in each pen. Later, I shared that study with Dr. Bronson Strickland at the Mississippi State Deer Lab, and just to see if his findings kind of fell in line with mine. And him and I both agreed that a good mineral program can add about 15% to the gross antler score of a mature buck. But I also talked yesterday about fetal programming. This really starts with the does, and you get those does on a good nutrition program before they ever become bred. And then it will be those fawns which will best express their genetic potential. Because, and Dr. Strickland really goes into this, if you folks would go back and listen to episode number 31 of Chasing Giants, we had him on as a guest. And he talked about fetal programming and how the does actually have, he described it as a switchboard within them. So they're setting that fetus up based on the environmental conditions where that doe's living. So if she's living in an area where quality nutrition is really scarce and she's living on pine cones or whatever to stay alive, then that fawn, his antler expression is going to be suppressed because he's not going to be able to receive the nutrition to grow a giant set of antlers. However, if that doe receives all the nutrition it needs, switches are flipped the way he described it in the genes of that fawn, and it allows that fawn to better express its genetic potential. And all this is a long-winded way of saying that the maximizer mineral that we came up with Real World started in that deer pen and those studies with those sets of buck fawns. But, as we got closer to bringing that to market, we brought on a couple of livestock nutritionists who had done a lot of work with captive deer. And we also brought on a whitetail veterinarian, Dr. Clifford Shipley at the University of Illinois, to fine-tune that mineral product that I had started. And what's really key is that there's a lot of mineral products being sold to the hunting public that will absolutely attract deer. I mean, they'll attract deer like a magnet. If all you care about is getting trail camera pictures, just about anything out there is going to work. But when it comes to really helping an animal express its genetic potential, increasing antler growth, if you will, I would put Maximizer next to anything out there. Of all these products being marketed to deer hunters, Maximizer is the only one that I know of that the captive industry is using. There's a lot of captive deer farmers using that Maximizer mineral in their feed rations. And the reason for it is it's not so much what an important part is what nutrients are in the mix, but a big key is the ratio of certain minerals. So, for example, I'm not going to give away all the secrets here for all these other companies to hear. We put a lot of money and research into this, but calcium and phosphorus, for example, needs to be in a 2-to-1 ratio. So there should be twice as much calcium as there is phosphorus in that mineral. If you're ever just randomly looking at a mineral product, the first thing to look for is calcium and phosphorus. They should be roughly in it. It doesn't have to be exact, but it should be close to a 2-to-1 ratio. And there's other nutrients as well. The Maximizer has 20 different nutrients in it, and that's more than about any other product that I've ever seen out there. So yes, that's a very long-winded way of answering your question. Yes, I absolutely do believe that mineral supplementation can increase antler growth. However, it's not a short-term fix. You don't go out there now and put your mineral out and next fall you got bigger bucks. You need to think of it as a minimum of a 5-year project. You start it today, and 5 years down the road is when you're really going to start noticing the difference. And another thing that I'll throw out is that one other key is where you're supplying this minerals. For example, where I'm at in Illinois, I'm in some of the richest soil on the planet. And minerals, we're not allowed to put out mineral supplementation, by the way, and so I don't. But in neighboring Iowa, Indiana, you can, very similar soils. Those deer are not going to, the mineral is not going to benefit those deer near as much as when you get in an area with really poor soils. And, here in the mountainous region of North Carolina, I'm guessing your soils are a whole lot poorer. Mineral supplementation is going to have a much bigger impact in an area like that than it will in an area with rich soils. So that's my spiel. I'll turn it over to Joe.
Yeah, I mean, that's scientific for sure, and I would agree with that 100%, the mineral that I've used, because a lot of the places, just what Don said, to piggyback on it, a lot of places in the South that I hunt is really soil deficient. And when you supplement that mineral, it can absolutely increase the inches of the deer and the quality of the herd, exactly like you say. And from a practical standpoint, yes, I want to get trail camera pictures, right? I want to do an inventory and know what's coming out there, so I want to attract them. So why not use something that's also going to be beneficial? So that's kind of how I look at it from a practical standpoint. Don understands the science of it. I kind of do the practical side of it is I'm going to put a mineral out because we can do that in South Carolina. We can supplemental feed. So I'm going to put it out to get the deer to come there to do an inventory, but that also really helps them. And exactly like you say, we've got one farm that's kind of big, and we've run mineral there for 5, 6, 7 years, and we have seen a considerable growth. I mean, we started with about 120 inch was our top end deer, and we've grown that with mineral and supplemental feeding. We've gotten some upper 130s, low 140s, but it's taken 5, 6 years to get there.
If you listen to many of our podcasts, you know that minimizing human intrusion is the key to our success. Don Higgins and I have been utilizing the Quiet Cat bike for many years now. As shed season is here, turkey season is not far away. There's no better choice to navigate around your property than a Quiet Cat bike. Go visit Quiet Cat and use the word Higgins to get a free trailer with any Quiet Cat electric bike purchase.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Don and Terry for putting this podcast together. It's been a real game changer on my part. Before I started listening to the podcast, I'd have mature, 4 or 5 year old bucks that were on my property, and I couldn't even get in front of them. I couldn't get daytime pictures of them hardly, and I know why now. I was walking all over that property trying to figure out where they were going to be going, and they were going there, but just in the middle of the night. I couldn't even hardly get in front of 3-year-olds. But after listening to the podcast, that whole thing changed. And I had 2 top bucks this past year that I was able to get in front of in the 3rd and the 4th day of deer season, bow season. Never could have dreamed of that before that. The question that I have for Don is a instance that I found myself in this past season. And that was that right where I hunt, it seems that the bucks top out at about 110 inches. I can't hardly seem to get any more inches than that on a deer. I had a deer that I believe was, if I have my math right, he was 7 years old last year, and he probably was only 110 inches. And I botched the job on that, and I never saw him again. I don't know what happened there. But so I was hunting. I didn't have dreams of any buck bigger than that. And a boy from church came and showed me a trail camera picture of this uppers 130 class deer that he was chasing like 20 minutes from where I hunt. And he had been chasing it for the year before for sure, and he wasn't sure about the year before there was a buck, but he wasn't sure if it was the same one. And I said, look, can I bring some of my cell cameras over and we can try to work on this thing together and get you on it? And so I came over, we put out a camera, and the deer was showing up from midnight to 4 o'clock. And I said, well, what Don says is if you got a midnight to 4 o'clock deer, you're not anywhere close to its bedding ground. You got to look half a mile away, a mile away. So I said, I have permission for a 3-acre piece of woods 1.25 miles from here. Let me throw a camera out on it. I haven't hunted it for a number of years because there was dogs running on it 3 years ago when I last put a camera on there. So I went and threw a camera out on that piece and checked it the next morning via web link, and there he was at 8:30 in the morning. It was like hit bullseye. And I was like, what do I do now? This buck is 30 inches bigger than I can dream about. Do I get permission for him on this piece to let him kill it? Or do I say, good luck where you're at? That's my question. Don, what would you have done?
Boy, talk about putting a guy on the spot. You know, it just so happens that I have a similar story. My business partner in the real world, Wes Delks, moved from Indiana to Illinois when he bought into Real World. And he moved there temporary with the plans to move back to Indiana. Well, last fall, I guess it was, late summer probably, he bought a farm in Indiana, and him and his wife moved. And Wes was watching a 200-inch buck. He was actually trying to kill it was well over 200 inches, about 220. And he shows up at my house one day, and he says, I wouldn't do this for anybody else. He says, I want to borrow your computer. And he throws in a thumb drive, and he's got trail camera pictures of this buck for the past 2 years. He's got aerial photos where he's marked on Google Earth where he got each picture. And he says, I'm not going to be able to hunt that buck next fall. I want you to hunt him. I want you to kill him. Well, I pulled up Google Earth, and it just so happened that where Wes was hunting this buck was less than a mile from where a good friend of mine owns and has a hunting farm. And that kind of put me in a bind because, I mean, this was like an hour from my house, but it's less than a mile from a very good friend who's done a lot for me over the years. So what I did was I called my friend that lived there, and I just told him the story. I said, hey, I was put on to a big buck in your neck of the woods. It's just south of your house a little ways, less than a mile. Do you know anything about this deer? Because before I ever go chase it, I'm going to make sure that you know what's going on, that I don't jeopardize our friendship. And, you know, I think sometimes in the deer hunting world, we let big bucks get the better of us, and we do things that we shouldn't, or we got to treat everybody the way we would want to be treated. And, you know, if a friend called me and the deer was a mile from my house and they had permission and I didn't know that the deer even existed, I'd 99% sure I'd tell them to go for it, depending on a lot of specifics. But this friend told me that he knew about the deer. He actually had pictures of the deer on his farm. The deer would come to his farm in the late season for the food he provided, and that he kind of left it in my lap, but at the same time he was letting me know that he really didn't want me to hunt that deer. So I walked away.
Because he knew he'd be dead.
That might be, but I walked away from the situation, and my advice to you would be to have a very candid talk with your friend. Let him know that you've had permission to hunt that place in the past. And does he know the deer's there now? The deer's on the wall now. Oh, so it's already over. But I would have just had a candid conversation with the friend, but it would probably have told you a lot about your friendship. I mean, that deer was over a mile from where he was hunting. You had permission there. He didn't. I'll just leave it at that. I'm a big fan of treating people the way you want to be treated, and don't let a big deer get your priorities out of whack.
At the end of the day, we love deer hunting. It's the passion. That's why we're all in this big arena. That's why we all pay money to go and hide investments and products from our wives that they don't know how much money we spend every year on all this stuff. But at the end of the day, if a deer is worth ruining a friendship or your relationship with God, you've lost focus on what you really need to do as an outdoorsman. So, good question. Okay, we're ready for you.
Yeah. Hello, guys. Sean from Maryland. Enjoy your podcast and what you guys are doing and what you stand for. Enjoyed meeting you guys here at the Dixie Deer Classic as well. So I guess being from Maryland, that kind of puts me in the middle too. Maybe same as Terry. My daughter's down here, so that keeps our interest down here a little bit. But we all love the deer hunt. You guys just mentioned that, and you talked a lot about the wind, and we always try to, hunt the wind and avoid the wind. The problem I have with that sometimes is, you really love to hunt, right? So, November comes along, it's a cool November morning, and you're just chomping at the bit to get out there, and the wind's wrong for the spot that you have targeted. So I just would like to hear you guys talk about, how you balance that a little bit. I know for myself, sometimes I have certain areas that I would like to put a stand up in for observation purposes, that you're probably not going to kill a deer there, but you want to be able to see what's going on and enjoy the morning's hunt, kind of a deal. And you might learn something from an observation of a pattern a deer might be taking when he's in the distance, that kind of thing. I struggle a little bit with missing 5 days of hunting during November when we're all just chomping at the bit. So I'll let you guys. I'd like to hear how you manage that, how you hold yourself back, I guess.
You want to take that one, Jim?
Sure. So I think you got to have your goals of what you're trying to accomplish, right? If you're wanting to hunt and take a deer, not a specific deer, you could have other places set up where you could go for the right wind. But a lot of times on those mornings in November, when it's cold at night, it starts to warm up. You've got the thermals that start rising. And we could do a whole podcast, I'm sure, on thermals. But that's something really important. Guys think the wind is wrong, I can't hunt there. But if it's a really light wind, the thermals will override that, and they'll rise in the morning. So you can actually get into your spot and hunt. So, again, there's tons of stuff out there on thermals, but that's really important, and they can override wind. So that's one thing you can check into. And, again, if you've got a specific buck that you're hunting, the discipline is to stay out of there when it's not right. And unfortunately, that's just what you got to do. But if you've got a big deer, 5, 6, 7-year-old buck, and the wind's wrong for 8 days in a row in the middle of November, and he's only killable in that one spot, I'm not going in there. I'll stay out of there. And because it's so hard to kill them that if you do tip them off, it makes the game so much harder. So that would be my thing is if you're wanting to enjoy hunting and go out and shoot a deer, by all means, you can check the thermals, and if you blow up a spot, it's not that big a deal. But if you're down to get a really big one that you've been targeting, the discipline is you got to stay out of there when the conditions aren't right.
Yeah, we've talked about discipline a lot on this podcast. If you've listened to it very long, you've heard the word discipline. And, last season was my 45th deer season. And ironically, today, I hunt less than I ever have in my life. Now, I prepare more. I prepare more than I ever have, but I actually sit in a tree less. And yet, in those 45 years, 4 of my top 5 bucks were killed in the last 4 seasons, with me sitting in the woods less than I ever have. You got to pick your hunts. And when the conditions are not right, you don't go, or you go someplace else. With a big mature buck, you only get about one chance to mess it up, and if you do, it's over. And I've just learned to be disciplined, and when the time's right, I go in. When the time's not, I do something else.
There's a popular YouTube channel that does an episode called Whitetail Cribs, and they're going to film at Joe's house this summer, and I think Don's house later this year. But I did an episode about 1.5 years ago. And we first went to the garage, and it had mounts of the first deers that I shot, as a late teenager, early 20s. They were great deer. But then we went downstairs, and there's 13 mounts in my basement that took me less time to get those 13 mounts that are all 5.5 years or older because I finally figured that out. So I get it. I got a full-time job. I got 3 kids that I'm chasing around. I don't have much time. But when it finally clicks, it's a whole lot easier. So, yeah, you could be in the woods busting your head against the trunk of the tree because nothing's happening, but you're not being anything productive. So we got another question. Where did we go? Okay, there we go.
Yes. I was wondering, how do you pattern deer when it's in the sparse pine forest and there's prolific amounts of acorns kind of scattered throughout?
That would be a good question for Joe Miles, because Don Higgins has no experience there.
So let's dissect that a little bit. Big pine woods. So if you've got acorns, you've obviously got oak trees in there, and it's just sparse big woods. Is that right? Is that pretty much? Okay. So what I do in that situation is I look for edges and topography changes. Edges meaning if you've got any cutover, any briar bed, any cane thicket, anything, any swamp, anything like that, creek crossings, creek bottoms. I mean, if it's just all big pine and open woods, it's going to be challenging if you have no edge. If it's your property, you own it, I would say create some edge, because a lot of the deer I've taken over the years have been on transitions between big cutovers in South Carolina and where those big hardwoods and pine thickets are, right on those edges. They'll bed in those big cutovers or those terrain changes and then come out and feed mostly at night. And I'm sure that's the problem you're having, is you're getting a lot of nighttime pictures. And unfortunately, if that's all you've got and you can't manipulate it, it's going to be tough. I don't know if that answered it, but
Brandon from Wilmington.
He's got a Let's Go Brandon shirt on.
That's right. I appreciate the shout out at the beginning. Let's go Brandon.
We were just talking about you. Everybody in this arena thought we were talking about something else. I don't get it. We were just cheering you on.
Well, look, I wouldn't be doing the listeners justice if I didn't ask this. So, Terry, this one's for both of us. But is there a mineral, Don, that I can put out in the woods for the deer herd to get the COVID under control? And would you recommend the vaccine to me?
There's a solution to that problem, and it's called quit voting Democrat. So I'm going to guess we don't have too many Democrats in the House.
This arena has a big bunch of tables set up with I don't know how many thousands of firearms. My friends over here at Free State Munitions, they got 50-gallon trash cans full of 9mm ammo. This is America here at this place.
Yeah, this is southern United States. It's at its best.
But I think if you could catch them little fawns and put a mask on them and let them grow up with a mask on it, all the world's problems would be saved.
And just to let you know, in the Maximizer mineral, we do have something in there for COVID, so you can go ahead and buy that and you'll be safe.
All right, go for it.
All right, well, I appreciate everything you do, and I can say that after listening to you, I've seen more deer in the woods than I've ever seen hunting before. I'd like to hear all three of you opinion on this. I have a situation, trying to decide how I'm going to hunt a specific deer next year. He's a good margin bigger than anything I've shot already, and so hopefully he's a really nice one next year. But the best I can get on him, the closest that I know of permission I can get to his bedding, is I can't hunt it with a bow, as far as I know. And if I could, I don't have the money and time to set it up. Would you take up a rifle? Because I can hunt that spot with a rifle. What would you do?
Who wants to start?
I hunt with a rifle. I don't care. No, I have, and I think Donald, when it gets to him, he doesn't have anything against gun hunters. It's just you have to hunt for what your goals are. If you let anybody in this arena, anybody on social media tell you that something is not right and you're inside the law and what you believe is ethically and morally right, you've caved to what this industry has become, and that's what we're trying to change. Okay? There's nothing wrong with that. But you'll get to the point, I've gotten there, you'll get to the point in your career where you're done shooting 130-inch deer with rifles at 250 yards. You'll want a 130-inch deer with a bow at 10 yards. And you'll get to the point you crank that level up, and then you crank that level up, and then you crank. So it's a matter of a journey for you. Don't let any of these people try to tell you that it's wrong. I get a little fired up, but
Oh, I agree with Terry. It's your choice. If it makes you happy, it is legal, do it. You probably heard me go on rants about mechanical broadheads or whatever. You know, that's my opinion. That doesn't mean that I think less of you if you choose something else. For me personally, to kill a deer with a rifle means nothing to me. But I don't look down on somebody that hunts with a gun. I mean, I've dedicated my whole life to hunting big deer with a bow. And, you know, I've never turkey hunted a day in my life. I haven't been fishing in 28 years. I don't hunt small game. It doesn't matter if it's January, July, or August. I mean, it's big deer for me. And I don't expect every other deer hunter to have the same, you know, level of experience or goals that I have. I mean, at one time I was shooting 1.5-year-old bucks with a gun. And I've slowly, over 45 years, got to where I am today. Wherever you're at in that journey, whatever point, you've got to hunt for you and nobody else.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, whatever you want to do is right. You know, we kind of talked about this last night, Don. there's too much competition between hunters, you know, in the world, and there's jealousy, and there's this guy looking down on this guy. I mean, the recurve hunter is looking down on the compound hunter. The compound hunter is looking down on the rifle muzzleloader hunter. Muzzleloader hunter is looking down. It's not about competition between us. The competition's with that animal. That's who we're competing with. If Don shoots a 200 next year and I don't shoot a deer, I'm going to be so happy for him because I know how hard it is. So it's not about competition between all of us. It's competition with that deer, and they normally win. And so when you do get one, I'm going to be the happiest guy on the earth for you because I know what it takes to do it, and I know how hard it is. So that's my thing. And, man, if you want to go in there with a rifle and shoot that deer and you send us a picture, or you're wearing your Asio camo next year and you got a picture of him, buddy, I'm going to put it on our Facebook page and I'm going to blow you up. So absolutely, if you want to go in there and do it, I mean, I'm going to be excited for you. And I know Don and Terry will be too.
Yes, my name is David Adams. I'm from Ruffin, North Carolina. Have you ever had a target deer that you didn't kill mainly because he was nocturnal? I've got a buck I've been watching for 3 years. I get pictures of him 5 o'clock in the morning, 5:30, and he's in my hunting area, and I'm scared to get in there to him. So I'm thinking he's bedding real close. Matter of fact, I know he is. I don't know, but I think I know, because beside me is an 80-acre cutover that nobody hunts. I went in it one time, and it blew my mind what I found, the beds and all. So common sense, 80 acres, nobody's in. It's a sanctuary. That's where they are. But he's nocturnal. So how do you deal with nocturnal bucks?
Is that for me or?
Have you ever had the same situation? The deer was nocturnal and you couldn't get on him.
The buck I shot in 2017, the second one after I shot Smokey, I shot a buck called Trump. And that buck was probably as nocturnal as any buck that I've hunted. And what you got to remember, though, is that, you know, I started hunting individual bucks in 2004. The middle buck, the middle 214-inch buck that's in my booth is one I shot in 2004. When I first seen that buck, that was the first time I ever had targeted a specific deer. And I've been doing it ever since. And in that last, 18 years or so, Trump is probably the closest thing to a nocturnal buck that I've ever come across. I don't believe that there's a buck that's nocturnal 365 days a year. Now, he may be nocturnal 350 days a year, but I don't think there's one that's nocturnal 365 days a year. And without a doubt, one of the biggest keys to taking my success to another level was when I figured out that I've got to hunt where those deer bed. I tell my consulting clients all the time that if you want to kill big deer consistently, we got to get them bedding on your property. That's the first thing I'm looking for. We got to get them bedded on the same property where you're hunting. If you're one property over from where that buck's bedded, I believe your odds of killing him are 10% what they are if you're on the same property. So, the whole nocturnal buck thing, I think a lot of it comes down to that buck may be nocturnal on the property where you're trying to kill him. I think there's a lot of bucks that, when the sun goes down, they're making their jaunt through the countryside. They're leaving trail camera pictures for various deer hunters. But when the sun comes up, they're back in their bed or very close to it. And if you're hunting that property, you got a chance. But if you're out where these pictures are being taken or wherever, you got almost zero chance. Every buck also has a unique personality. Smokey, the buck that's out there in my booth, the easiest buck I've ever killed. Even though he's one of the biggest, he's also one of the easiest because he had a small home range. He hardly ever left my farm, and he moved in daylight. Trump, the second buck I killed the same year, was one of the hardest bucks. But I just kept plugging away because I had a pretty good feeling of where he was bedded. And, eventually it was on my 10th hunt that season. I finally got it done. So I'll let Joe add to this because he's probably got some thoughts that I've never even considered as far as nocturnal bucks.
Yeah, in the southeast, we have a ton of pressure, right? A lot of hunting pressure. There's other parts of the country that have it too. So it does force a lot of those deer to become nocturnal. But I agree that, they might be nocturnal on your property. And if you can't get access to where they're bedded, then it's going to be tough to kill them. I mean, I face that almost every year with nocturnal deer because I think there's about 8,000 acres that encompasses the area I hunt, and there's 64 hunters that hunt in there. So as you can imagine, there's four-wheelers in and out, there's rifle hunting. It makes it super, super tough, and a lot of these guys go nocturnal. But it all does, and not to sound like Pete and repeat here, but the bedding is so important. And if you've got that 80-acre cutover on your property, you can kill that deer. You can kill him because you follow the steps. He is going to come to food. He is going to go with does, right, when the rut's going in. It may only be 2 or 3 days, but if you know where the food is, you know where he's bedded, and you stay on that mission, you get a super big cold front that comes in an afternoon. He may get up early, and you got to be mobile. You got to be able to move right then and go and hunt him. When that first doe comes in, if he's the big dominant buck, he's going to be out looking for her. So you are going to have an opportunity to kill him if you've got his bed on your property. If you don't have that bed on your property, it's going to be super difficult to get him because they're going to be nocturnal for you.
Joe said that, go mobile. That's why Asio camo is also compatible with tree saddles, just in case you're wondering.
Yes.
All right, you got a question up there. Oh, hold on. Oh, you got to start over. Sorry.
Okay, I'll start over. Absolutely. Hunting North and South Carolina and just started not really managing my own leases, which is very interesting. Can you talk to the beginner hunter or someone that's trying to evaluate really and truly their doe to buck ratio? Because I need to know when I need to kill more does.
That's you.
I get that question a lot, actually. And to be honest, trying to affect the buck-doe ratio is something that you're never going to be able to do on one property. Because you could have an abundance of does and you can shoot 20 and 30 more show up. It's got to be handled on a large-scale basis, either statewide or at least county-wide, because the does that you shoot are just going to be replaced by does from your neighbors. To be honest, a lot of people talk about wanting a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1 buck-doe ratio. I would rather see it about 5 or 6 to 1. I don't want that buck that's staying on my property to have to go to the neighbors searching for his next hot doe. I want enough does on my farm that he can find one there. So I wouldn't get too caught up on it, actually. If I was going to do anything to try to correct that balance, I would focus on the late season. You don't want to put too much pressure on your property early just for the sake of shooting does. At least that's my philosophy. I would rather at least get the rut out of the way and those better times to kill the bigger mature bucks, and then focus on the does towards the end.
And if for the people that are here aren't normal listeners, when you listen to Chasing Giants and watch the other videos that we produce and put on the YouTube channel, it gets into a whole lot more clear description of when you are going to kill does, which does to kill, because of maternal aggression and buck fawns and shooting a doe with twin buck fawns versus just an average doe. It gets into a whole lot more of the science side that even, when Dr. Strickland comes on. So you can go back and reference some of those earlier episodes. All right, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, by the way, welcome to North Carolina. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Privileged to have you here. I was thinking about the does. It seems like there's always a doe that will blow off in a hurry. There's like a lead doe maybe. And I've heard you say already that if a doe has 2 buck fawns, shoot the doe and those buck fawns will stay around because of the, I forget the term you use for that. But, so what I was wondering is, that doe obviously is protecting the herd. Is there any point at which that doe is a liability or an asset to larger bucks on the property? Yeah, kind of like that.
Well, that's a pretty unique thought and something I'd really never considered. But I know exactly the doe you're talking about because I've had my encounters with a couple of those over the years. My philosophy is she's going to hurt my chances of killing a buck more than she's going to help save a mature buck's life, as you're talking about. I would try my best to kill that deer. In regards to, you mentioned the does with 2 buck fawns. There was research done at the University of Georgia by Dr. Carl Miller that showed that basically when a doe gets ready to have fawns, she will run off her fawns from the year before. It's Mother Nature's way of preventing inbreeding. Those buck fawns will, on average, in this research, it showed that on average those bucks would relocate 5 to 20 miles from where they were born. Now, some of them even went farther than that. Some of them went 100 miles from where they was born. 90% of the time they will go between 5 and 20 miles. But that same research showed that if that mother, that doe, got killed before she had those next fawns, before she ran off those yearling buck fawns, if that doe got killed, numbers reversed, and 90% of the time those buck fawns would remain right where they were born. So what that means to us, if we've got a good nutrition program on our property, we want those buck fawns that were born to that doe that got good nutrition while she was pregnant. We want those buck fawns staying around. So, on my property, we don't have an abundance of deer in my area. We've got a huntable herd, but we don't have an abundance. The one doe that's in trouble on my farm is a doe that walks by with twin buck fawns with her. She's going to get the hammer because the odds are those 2 buck fawns are staying. So I'm very selective about which does I will shoot.
But we're also going to add in there that he's very careful about where he's shooting that doe at.
That's true.
I think the other thing that people lose focus of is if you're popping that nanny doe to get her out of the herd and it's in the spot that you're going to try to kill a mature buck on and have all that pressure and intrusion, because she's going to run in your sanctuary. It's going to happen. You might be doing more harm than good in that case.
Yep. You got anything to add there, Joe?
I think y'all hit it.
All right, we got time for maybe 2 more questions because they're going to run us out of here. Go ahead.
Okay, this is for Joe. In your honest opinion, is the Midwest deer or the Southeast deer harder to hunt?
Here we go. Thank you, buddy.
I think I know where you're going.
I appreciate that.
Southeast.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing that with my good friends from the Midwest here. Thank you. I will say, now this is my personal experience, right, from where I have hunted. I was blown away at how gentle the deer were in Illinois and Kansas compared to the deer that I hunted at home. Because, again, 60-some-odd people on an 8,000-acre deal. I mean, the pressure, just the smallest little thing. And our deer down here are so jumpy. And it's, guys that can consistently kill 5-year-old bucks in the Southeast on these really high-pressured properties, they can kill anything on the planet. It is really, really tough to kill the deer that we have here. Now, that's not to say that a 5-year-old buck in the Midwest is not a master of his environment and also really hard to kill. But I think it all goes down to pressure. In South Carolina, where I live, rifle season comes in August 15th. You can run them with hounds. The rifle season goes all the way to January 1st. You can kill 5 bucks a year, unlimited does. So you can imagine how much pressure these deer get. I mean, it wasn't 3 years ago that it was unlimited bucks. Guys were killing 15, 16 bucks a year, 4 points, 6 points, these little things, sawing their horns off and throwing them in the garage. So I think y'all would agree that it really boils down to pressure. I'm sure there's places in the Midwest that the pressure is so severe that it makes them just as tough. But from my personal experience, the deer here are hard to get.
Well, I think most of you folks probably know that I've kind of built my reputation on a no BS approach and just telling it like it is, and whether we're talking politics or whatever. And I'll be the first to admit that, in my opinion, the deer in the farm country of the Midwest are the easiest deer to hunt. And some of it is the deer themselves, but a lot of it is the layout of the cover and the terrain. It's a no-brainer when you drive by a field that's a wide open field of harvested soybeans that's 500 acres. There's not going to be any deer out there. Those little pockets of cover, along the creeks, little woodlots, it's a whole lot easier to hunt than these big pine plantations of the South. So being an OBS guy, I'll be the first to admit you guys' deer down here are a whole lot tougher than what I'm dealing with.
All right. Tim from Kannapolis, North Carolina. Do you all grunt, snort, wheeze, or rattle at all?
You want that one?
Sure. I do. I have grunted and I have snort wheezed some older bucks in. I do not do a lot of blind rattling. I really don't ever even take rattling horns with me. So I'm not a big rattle guy, but I have grunted some bucks in, and I also have snort wheezed some giants in Illinois.
Mm-hmm. I at one time I've done it all. I used to carry rattling antlers. I used to carry grunt call. I still carry grunt call. I used to do it all. And, what I found is, and what I believe is, when you start talking about bucks 5.5 years and older, you're talking about a totally different animal than a 3-year-old deer. And I think a lot of times when you start banging those antlers together in the deer woods to a mature buck, you're saying, you might as well be blowing a trumpet and saying, hey, I'm over here, don't come over this way. Because I think they're so in tune to what's going on. And our bucks encounter a lot of pressure too. They've just, our landscape is laid out in such a way that there's pockets where no hunting's allowed, where these bucks can get older. So a buck that's 5 years old, he's probably heard rattling antlers. He's definitely heard grunt calls. And, if he hears it and slips downwind and he catches the scent of a hunter, well, guess what? He's 100 times harder to kill the next time. About the only time that I will use my grunt call is if I see a target buck that's going to pass out of range and I'm trying to call him in. Other than that, that grunt call stays in my pack. And usually what happens is this buck comes by that I want to shoot, and he's out of range, and I'm sitting there digging through my pack because I haven't grabbed that grunt call in so long. It's buried under my toilet paper or something in the bottom. By the time I find it, the buck's already gone. So that just shows you about how often I use a grunt call.
I've been working on this business opportunity since the hunting industry has so many gimmicks in it. It's like a Slim Jim piece of meat that's JTM barbecue and hard-boiled eggs that just gets you to where you can grunt call on demand while you're in the tree stand and don't need to put nothing in your mouth. But so far, I haven't gotten the science quite down yet. So
he's been working on it, though, believe me.
I'm glad I'm not sharing a hotel room with you.
All right, do we got time for one more? We got one more question. Who's got it?
If you're looking for real-world wildlife products, he's your guy in North Carolina. Take it away, Jimmy.
He'll save you a bunch of money in shipping.
All I got to say is, what do you guys think about Don Higgins and Terry Peer? I just met Don Friday morning and Terry Friday evening. And I walked up to Don, and he stuck his hand out to shake my hand. And I said, I don't want a handshake. I said, I want to hug your neck because I love you, man. But just blessed to have the opportunity to just be a small part of real world. And I just want to know what you guys think of North Carolina. And we just really appreciate you guys being here. You just don't even imagine. You don't even know how special that is, and I really thank you guys.
Well, I can tell you the weather down here is fantastic. I packed a bunch of hoodies and then got down here and it was 80 degrees, so I do like the weather, but I'll stick to hunting the big bucks in the Midwest. You guys got my respect for hunting the deer around here, I can tell you that.
Well, I'll tell you what impresses me the most is the people. You guys are the most well-mannered people in the South. You come up north, and well, I don't even want to say what kind of greeting you might get up there, but down here it's yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir. Everybody is just complimentary, And I guess I should have been born in the South because you guys are my kind of people. But you can probably tell by my accent, I'm a stinking Yankee. So
well,
I'm stuck with whatever I.
Hey, let's make Sarge famous here. Here's a great example. We go to these trade shows all over the country, and everyone has these security workers working at the doors, and half the time they're just sitting on a chair playing on their phone. And you've got to meet some awesome people. And I want to tell you what, these guys are all, I think most of you are volunteers that are here working this.
Every one of us.
Yeah, that working this event. But these guys next to our door, if they see somebody carrying something out, they're jumping in, packing bags of seed and everything. And you got to know one of the guys and took a picture with him earlier. We'll end on this little story here. Let's make him famous.
It's fantastic. There is a gentleman that's manning the door right by our booth. And he was just so polite and just so helpful to everybody coming along that I struck up a conversation with him. And he's a black gentleman, and we talked about everything from politics to race to whatever. And I'm telling you what, I've got so much respect for that guy, just hearing his stories and everything. And he doesn't know that I know this, but I was told by a friend of his that this gentleman lost 2 brothers in Vietnam. And he was so moved by that he joined the military. And he's retired from the military now. And Sarge or Ranger Shepherd is what he likes to go by. You'll see him. He's got Ranger across he was an Army Ranger. And if this world had more Ranger Shepherds, it'd be a lot better place. And he's just representative of the kind of people that I've met down here. And I'm telling you, you guys are my kind of people. I mean, polite, courteous to each other. If you hold the door open for somebody, both the man and the lady will thank you for it. Back home, you might get flipped off. That's how bad it is. You're just my kind of people, and that's what I love about the South.
All right. Well, we thank everybody for coming. We're going to wrap up the podcast. Come back over to the booth. Come over and see Joe Miles at the Asio booth. We do have tickets for Lester's Feet. If you want to join in on this raffle, 100% of the proceeds are going to go to families with sick kids. But thanks for joining us, and tune in next week in the Chasing Giants podcast brought to you by Asio Gear.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Asio Camo, Via Farm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.